Centric Productions presents
Supply Chain Collaboration by Saul Bosch.
Case study of the Australian blood product supply chain.
Wow, what an introduction. Thanks, girls. As you can see, my name is Saul Bosch and I'm currently studying a Master of Business Administration with the University of Tasmania. A little bit about myself. I've spent 15 years in the West Australian State Government in numerous roles spanning public transport policy, planning and investment, microeconomic and regulatory reform, and in the regulation of the state's 5 port authorities, which are government business trading enterprises. I'm a father and my 2 daughters are my greatest achievement. Today we will look at collaboration across the Australian blood product supply chain. The presentation is broken into chapters and progress can be tracked using the diagram in the top left of the screen. It's also important to quickly look back on what we have learned so far to provide context for this presentation. We defined supply chain management in Module 1 as the design and management of seamless value-added processes across organisational boundaries to meet the real needs of the end consumer. Fawcett, page 6. We discussed in Module 2 systems thinking to be the holistic process of considering both the immediate local outcomes and the longer-term systems-wide ramifications for decisions. In Module 3 we focused on customer value and discovered why it's so important for the end customer to be the focal point of supply chain strategies. Modules 4, 5 and 6 were more technical in nature and helped us to design supply chains, manage costs and ensure that organisations do not stray from their core competencies. We touched on rationalisation in Module 7 and learned how to streamline supply chains so they are lean and agile. This presentation will focus on collaboration, but also touches on performance management and risk management in a supply chain. And also we shall refer back to the unit outline, which gives a little Easter egg about collaboration in this sentence. It is often said that supply chain management is about the management of relationships. You will find this theme reappearing time and again during your studies. So let's kick off and think about what is supply chain management and collaboration. There are, of course, 3 different approaches to defining it, which vary in sophistication. At one end, you have community opinions, and at the other, more technical and prescriptive definitions proposed by academia. So let's start by asking some people on the street what they think supply chain collaboration is. Obviously, due to COVID-19 restrictions, we had to use Facebook to pose the question, but anyway, here are some example responses.
I think about farming, so I think about a farmer supplies obviously land for chickens lay eggs, and then a supermarket, big supermarket chain will come and collect them and they'll supply them so we can buy. So that's
working towards making a profit, and every link in that chain is very important. Nobody is more important than another.
That there's a promise of better prices with an underlying mistrust that they shall monopolise the market.
And collaboration to me means that all parties in the process have got the same processes, so maybe they're working from the same software, which means that you couldn't have mistakes happen.
And reduce the risk of the supply chain deliverables.
So we've heard that supply chain collaboration means different things to different people, and that's understandable as it's a relatively new concept and colloquially gets mixed up with logistics, transport and economics. Alright, moving away from an anecdotal definition, let's get one from academia. Let's hear from Cranfield University's Professor Wilding and Carl Kuehl.
Value. Richard, what exactly is supply chain collaboration?
Well, I think let's go back to some first principles. One of the definitions we use for supply chain management is that supply chain management can be defined as the management of upstream and downstream relationships with suppliers, distributors and customers to achieve greater customer value added at less total cost. So the first thing we need to think about is from a collaboration perspective in the supply chain, we have to take up responsibility for managing relationships. And this is the first place where often people start to go wrong, because if you think about, if we're managing anything else in the supply chain, so if you think about managing inventory, you know, often say, what do you need to manage inventory? You're probably going to have people. Yeah, you might even have some people. You're going to have some resource available, which might be there to put the stuff. You're going to have processes associated with it.
Information systems.
Yeah, information systems. You're going to have key performance metrics and so on and so forth. Problem is with managing relationships, most organisations just do not do that. They do not manage relationships. They do not dedicate resource to the management of relationships. They don't have key performance indicators for.
Also from Cranfield University, Emeritus Professor Martin Christopher wrote a book called Logistics and Supply Chain Management. Paraphrasing Professor Christopher, Chapter 13 describes collaboration as including the relationships across supply chain partners, where information is shared freely and accessibly. This includes information about customers, their demand, preferences, expectations, and importantly, how they define value. For example, information is shared about customer expectations on product availability, cost, reliability, condition, and other metrics. Depending on the product type and customer demand profile, relationships can vary in depth and breadth. For example, these can include one-off or more transactional relationships in nature, through to more strategic, longer-term and integrated relationships. Regardless, these relationships manifest because there is a shared alignment of interest across partners, which is built on trust. Christopher states that the benefits for collaboration include greater value to the end customer, reduced costs, including transactional and procedural costs. Importantly, collaborative relationships help reduce uncertainty to individual partners, as information is shared across the partners. For example, reducing the variation between future demand forecasts and actual results, because partners share their knowledge of future customer expectations. Reduced uncertainty means partners do not need to rely heavily on large inventory stores to buffer against surges in demand. This results in smaller capital outlays and reduced total cost along the supply chain. Collaboration is therefore very important to supply chains, and we will hear about this importance from Mike Jeter, who's talking to Bob Bauman, the editor of Supply Chain Brain.
Well, the answer to resilience is collaboration. Why does collaboration so often fail? And how can one advance using that concept in a real sense?
Yeah, I think if you talk to a lot of people, what I find when speaking with our clients is sometimes they say collaboration is a bad word. What they have found is that oftentimes collaboration is used to push responsibility onto the less powerful trading partner and make that trading partner responsible for mistakes that happen in the supply chain. So I think there's a little bit of skepticism amongst professionals sometimes about collaboration, and I think there needs to be a reset to really get people kind of working and partnering in the way that we saw over the last 15 or 16 months that helps solve problems.
So now we have a definition of supply chain collaboration, and we understand the theoretical framework. Let's jump straight in to the case study of the Australian blood product supply chain. You might not know what these products are. However, they are time sensitive, they're high quality and highly regulated, they're really expensive. Some cost more per gram than gold. They are complex. There is a requirement that product availability is as close to 100% all of the time because lives depend on them. So what do the products look like in the supply chain? You might know them already because they're in your body. There's red cells, platelets, and for example, red cells, they can last for about 35 days at 4 degrees. Platelets can last about 5 days at 22 degrees. And once plasma is frozen, it can be stored for 36 months. And in the case of immunoglobulins, this can include a 2-year life. The supply chain for Australian blood products is pictured on the screen now. The National Blood Authority is both the regulator and manager of Australia's National Blood Reserve. The government body controls the market and intervenes through such actions as setting prices all the way through to controlling supply. They also control access to the supply chain through contracts and other formal arrangements. Moving downstream, we can see that Tier 2 customers could include the health providers, such as hospitals and doctors, that order the blood products on behalf of patients. Patients are therefore then the final tier customer. The Australian Red Cross estimates that 1 in 3 Australians will need blood or blood products in their lifetime. Therefore, demand is volatile and forecasting often falls short because it is difficult to precisely predict the number of, say, annual trauma or accidents that occur, or how many Australians will be diagnosed with serious health conditions that require short, medium or long-term treatment using blood products. Moving upstream, we can see that the final tier suppliers are the Australian donors and overseas donors that donate their raw blood. Tier 3 suppliers, such as the Australian Red Cross, collate that blood and synthesize it. That also includes overseas manufacturers. Testing and processors could form Tier 2 suppliers who then provide the product to CSL Behring for final manufacturing. In reality, the supply chain is way more complicated. There are thousands of donors, hundreds of donation centres, there are transporters, testers, manufacturers, more transporters, storers, National Blood Authority being the government. Then there are the Tier 2 suppliers being health providers, thousands of doctors, and patients, and many patients can require more than one blood product in their life or at one time. And of course you've got the international suppliers and the international donors, the international donor centres, the air freighters, the transportation companies. It all adds to the complexity of the supply chain. And just looking at the domestic upstream supply chain, you can see donation centres where donors donate their raw blood, which is pooled, in some cases frozen for transport, sorted, and then sent to the manufacturer. It would be remiss of me not to mention network design and the importance of having donation centres close to upstream suppliers. However, due to time constraints, I have created a separate video which will be uploaded as well if you're interested. This presentation will focus on a segment of the supply chain, being a blood product called immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins are a plasma-derived product. There is approximately 12,500 Australian patients that require them, who are supplied by about 1,200 hospitals that are registered in the Bloodstar system. And the product mix is usually about 45% imported to 55% domestic. So let's look at the mechanisms that the National Blood Authority has to facilitate collaboration. Using information from the National Blood Authority website, we can see that collaboration is rather complex and is almost as complicated as the supply chain itself. And it would be wrong to focus on just the IT platform being the main source of collaboration. The IT platform is to collaboration what the ball is to the game of basketball. Focusing on just the ball, you will miss out on the purpose of the game, who are the players, what are the rules, and even what are the techniques of passing the ball. What are the mechanisms to facilitate collaboration? How do the relationships facilitate the flow of information, products, and finances across supply chain partners? Using information from the NBA website, I have mapped the factors that influence collaboration. In order to access, purchase, supply a blood product, the product must comply with regulatory requirements within the Therapeutic Goods Administration Act. These requirements ensure product quality, effectiveness, and safety. Products must also be barcoded using a system shared by all partners. Suppliers must enter into a contractual arrangement with the National Blood Authority and be registered in its database and systems. I will discuss these in the next slide, but there's about 15 in total. The customer, in this case a patient, must have a medical condition managed by a doctor and be registered in the NBA database. The doctor too must be registered in the NBA database and orders the products on behalf of their patients. This means navigating Australia's Medicare system, as these products are subsidised by taxpayers and circulates finances to suppliers. The NBA, being a government entity, must comply with parliamentary and ministerial oversight. It uses supply chain information to report to its shareholders, the Australian taxpayers, on the performance of supply chain. This includes annual reports, annual Commonwealth budget submissions, parliamentary questions and other government business enterprise requirements and business reporting mechanisms. So how does the National Blood Authority compel supply chain partners to collaborate? We can find this out in their service of agreements. And in this case, let's have a look at the Australian Red Cross Society Deed of Agreement. This is available on the NBA website. But here you can see there's a whole chapter which includes clauses on communication principles. There's expectations for mutual goals, setting of key performance indicators, including supply chain management KPIs. But there's also a requirement to meet, report, and communicate across the relationship. More specifically, there is a requirement to share data sets. Diving a bit deeper into the Red Cross Society Deed of Agreement, let's look at the mutual goal, which is customer-centric. On the screen you can see now, the mutual goal is focused on ensuring product safety in terms of supply chain management metrics, limiting variations in quality. Product availability, the supply chain metric being fulfillment rates and order cycle times for orders and delivery. Supply chain efficiency, the metric being reducing the total cost to consumers, but also order accuracy, documentation accuracy, and delivery accuracy. Service and satisfaction in terms of customer satisfaction. However, this is more geared towards Tier 2 customers because hospitals and doctors and hospital staff manage orders on behalf of customers. Now we have an understanding of the deeds of agreements. Let's see how this is achieved in practice through the sharing of data, information and knowledge.
All the action happens. On these screens, we can assess whether a particular product is running low or where they are needed most across Australia. Making sure we have enough products but not too much is a balancing act. Blood products, although necessary for many Australians, can be costly to manufacture and have use-by dates, so we don't want them expiring before they are used. And sometimes more effective alternative treatments are available for patients. This is why BloodStar is so important. It centralises the ordering, dispensing and supply of immunoglobulin products. With BloodStar, we can make sure that access to government-funded immunoglobulin products is fair, consistent with current clinical evidence, and most importantly, that this limited resource is available to patients who are likely to get the greatest benefit.
To explain in more detail, let's choose a point in the supply chain to visualise how information, products and finances flow between partners. This screenshot of the ordering interface, which Tier 2 customers order blood products on behalf of their patients. This secure platform enables orders to be submitted from Tier 2 customers, which outlines the type and the amount of blood products required, the date that they're required, like when, and the location. But the system also enables Tier 2 customers to submit future orders, which helps the NBA gauge future demand for products and forecast future inventory requirements as best as possible. And here you can see the quantity required and the price, with the little send order function as well. Collaborative relationships benefit the supply chain partners and result in better outcomes for the end customer. Information becomes transparent. Having a central body manage the network brings with it the benefits from centralized information, and the creation of a repository where information currency and accuracy can be managed and updated in real time. The information technology costs are also borne by the NBA, being taxpayer subsidised, reducing the IT costs to all partners. This then reduced the final total cost to customers, who can also benefit from better supply chain performance. For example, reduced likelihoods of incorrect, inaccurate, poor quality or damaged orders. The information sharing becomes a substitute for inventory, as partners share in real time substantial information about the customer and their requirements. Upstream partners therefore also do not have to carry as much inventory and have greater visibility of supply chain risks such as surges in demand. This also reduces the amount of capital tied up unnecessarily in inventory and can enable suppliers to focus on their core business and competencies, such as new product development. While this presentation has been about collaboration, it's important to see how this can feed into the measurement of performance and risk management. Because the National Blood Authority is a central entity, it can establish performance metrics, and because it's a government body, it must publish annually outcomes on its website. For example, supply chain metrics here, for order fulfillment rates, customer satisfaction, and finance. But interestingly, metrics for separate entities within the supply chain, such as Lifeblood Australia, who take donations for raw blood, are also included. Here you can see metrics for donor management. There are also metrics for inventory bans and customer service levels. Performance is clearly articulated where actual results are tabled next to targets. And this provides you with a better understanding of how collaboration leads into performance and risk management, especially in the Australian blood product supply chain. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation on the Australian blood product supply chain. I hope the tools, techniques, and theories that are discussed in this have sparked an interest in supply chain management. More importantly, I hope that you've learned about the importance of coordinating and collaborating across the supply chain to deliver outcomes for your customers. For more information, please see the references attached to this video. And finally, I implore you to consider giving the gift of life by donating blood at your local centre. For more information, you can go to www.donateblood.com.au. Thank you very much.